Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For tonight's episode, it's kind of a special Not Too Comic Book, and this episode I will be talking about the back-to-back episodes of Lucifer that came out tonight. Obviously, if you're looking for Supergirl and iZombie, don't worry, I will be doing them as a separate Not Too Comic Book. I don't know which order I'm going to be releasing these, but nevertheless, just kind of putting that out there. So, obviously, because it's back-to-back episodes, I'm going to be talking about each individual episode. So, I'll talk about the first episode and I'll move on to the second episode. But overall, super good episodes. Obviously, I went into these episodes knowing the premise to them, but it didn't matter because they were so good. This episode, I knew it had something to do about Ella, but I didn't really remember, if it dealt with the whole thing, the same question I had, and it was. It's about the voices thing. It was something, like I said, I brought it up in the video. It's the one thing that came up this season. She references it in that Las Vegas episode when they're helping Candy, and she never says a word about it for the rest of the season. I'm like, what was that about? Well, we find out it's because Ella could see ghosts. I'm like, what? And it's like, oh God, just tell Lucifer. I mean, maybe Lucifer can actually see the ghost, which, interesting enough, her ghost friend, Ray Ray, is played by fucking Charlene Yee. I was like, what? That's so dope. I was getting excited just because I feel like I don't see her in a lot of stuff. I think the most recent thing I saw her was maybe season 1 of the Netflix show Love, just because I was recently watching that. But I think that's the only season she's in. I mean, to be fair, she wasn't in the second season to my recollection, and I haven't finished the third season, so who knows. But other than that, I think the last thing I saw her in was the final season of House, I think. So I don't know, just like I said, I get excited. I'm like, oh my God. And it's like, so that explains what this is all about. The moment she's like, what are you doing here? Her friend. I was like, it's like, oh man, I don't want you around. It's like, oh man, she's a troublemaker. It's like, oh man, trouble from Ella's past is coming to follow her. And it's like, oh, there's no one there. I was like, oh my God. And because the whole hearing voices thing made me go, oh, is it her being crazy? It's like, no, it seems like that played a part in her episode. I mean, just her childhood in general, growing up. It's not something she tells a lot of people because people will think she's crazy. She's been on medication for it because, when she was younger, she'd kind of say it, but then, she didn't think much of it. And most people, like I said, thought she was crazy. It seems like it's not all ghosts she sees. Obviously, she sees one, but obviously we find out the answer to that, but I'm going to dive into that later. But it's so good. I love it being such a central Ella episode because we actually get to see kind of Ella's sunny disposition. It's like she's walking to the crime scene. Hey, what's going on? How are you? It's like this and that. It's like Ella's just super friendly and very nice to everyone. And I just love that aspect to her. I thought that was such a neat thing. I just thought that was so neat. Basically, this involves a lady named Beth who works with kids. She ended up being killed, but basically it's kind of sad when you look at it in the long run because it's like, oh yeah, you have that girl named Becker who actually is like, oh man, she must have seen something. It's like, no, she actually didn't see anything, which her story is kind of a side thing that deals with Dan and Lucifer, which I'll save that. But this mainly dealt with Chloe and Ella, which I feel like that combination never happened. Obviously it happened, but I feel like mainly on a case together. No, that's why I like this episode being centered around Ella, because I was like, there's so much to her story I got to find out about, and I'm glad they answered it in this episode, and I thought that was kind of neat. Her struggling with it, because for her this entire case was about the fact is that she has a secret that she doesn't want to tell anybody, because the moment she tells people, what did they do? They look at her with pity, and she doesn't want these people to look at her. Obviously, she says just her friends, but this group became like a family to her, and she didn't want to jeopardize that, because that's why she probably had reservations about going back home and everything. Back to Detroit, because one of her brothers was moving back to Detroit. That's why it's like, oh, this is going to be dealing more with her family. Because I don't know if this is the same brother that we met in season 2, the one who works at the chop shop, which kind of comes up in the second episode a little bit, but I'll kind of get to that when I get to it. I wonder, is it that little brother or is there a different brother she was kind of referencing? I don't know. I don't remember that first brother where he stands. Is he is he a younger brother? Is he an older brother? Whatever the situation is. And obviously we met another brother, kind of like the golden son in this season, but nevertheless, but it's like she doesn't, she ever goes back to Detroit, she probably has that stigma with her. Being here in LA is like, oh, I get to start over. No one knows me because of that. And she recreated herself. I got this sunny disposition. I'm kind of happy and stuff like that. The go-lucky person that people know her for. So it's kind of interesting because it seems like maybe Ella has always been like this, but I think coming to LA, she pushes that for, she probably pushes it for at least 5%. I'm still sure 95% of who she is still her, but there's probably subconsciously she probably pushes that even more just so she can be friendly with people because, like, you know, she's trying to overcompensate for that aspect about herself, because it's like, cause for her it just kind of comes and goes throughout her life. So, but I love that Charlene Yee's character is kind of lying to her the entire time. It's like, oh yeah, I'm here because, yeah, I knew Beth. And it's like, you're lying so hard. You're a terrible liar. You know, that also shows you how adorable Ella is, because she's so gullible about the situation. And it's like, oh no, I'm just kind of, it's like, okay, so, you know, it's like, oh, I can talk to other spirits. It's like, oh, I can't do that. Okay, the truth in the matter is, like, oh, like, we're connected. I was like, and then even I started thinking, like, Ella's like, oh, so her murder's connected to yours. It's like, so that's your unfinished business. It's like, oh, no, it's not. It's basically, she wanted to make sure that Ella stayed here, because being here is good. Because it's like, she's like, your family, they're leeches. Like, all they ever do is just take from you because you're such a nice person. But it's like, look, these people know who you are, but no one ever takes advantage of you. They love you and accept you for who you are, and they don't try to take advantage of your, you know, you being grateful. It's like, you spent so much time taking care of other people. It's like, I thought it was time someone had your back, and that's what that was all about. And I was like, oh, that's so beautiful. That's so sweet. It's like, oh man, she's got a, like I said, I wanted the episode to be like Lucifer goes like, oh, hey, oh, who's that girl? And but wait, you can see her? I thought that was going to be a part of it. Also, but like, there's so many twists and turns to the story. It's kind of sad in the long run, because we end up finding out the one behind this murder was the boy, Felix. His dad was the one behind the murder, because basically he doesn't really communicate well. Communication is hard for him, and he was going to Beth for that. But Beth was suggesting he takes more violin lessons, kind of dedicating more time to it. And it's like, my son, I want my son to be normal. I want him to be more social and stuff like that. But like what Beth was having planned for him, he would have been more reclusive and just kind of taken steps back. I sent him to Beth so he could take steps forward. He wouldn't be, it's like, oh, that's not normal. But Ella points that out. And that's a sad thing. It's because you couldn't accept your son for him being him. Like, the fact is, he's talented at the violin. It's something he's passionate about, and it's something important to him. That wasn't enough for you. You couldn't just love your son like that. He had to be quote unquote normal. You just couldn't accept your son as being, you know, I mean, and that's why he opened up, like, it's like, oh, he doesn't open up to strangers. He opened up to Ella. I mean, we end up finding out that that's what kind of triggered this whole situation for Ella, too, because, like, she was in a car accident at 8 years old, and that's when she met Ray Ray. So, but it's sad circumstances, but I think, like, Ella was the perfect fit for that, because it made her kind of confront her own situation, because she always feels kind of like a weirdo outsider because of her, oh, I can see a ghost situation. And she said that line that it kind of broke my heart. She's like, Chloe is like the nicest person ever, but if she ever looked at me like that way, it'd break my heart. And she's like, I don't want to even give her a chance to look at me like that. And when the time came to it, Ella told her the truth. And Chloe's like, well, I've seen some weird stuff, which obviously I doubt, like, to be fair, these episodes are supposed to be standalone, so they're going to kind of take place at any point in time. So you could make the argument this takes place after she's learned about Lucifer's secret. You make that argument, or just the argument like, oh, some of the stuff she's seen over the course of the show. But there's also the aspect of like, well, she's probably talking from a cop perspective of like, yeah, there's been a lot of crazy stuff she's seen that she probably can't explain. So, but she was willing to accept it, because she's like, you're my friend, Ella. I'd never like look at you like, oh, think you're crazy. Like, you know, I'd never look at you that way. And it's just like, you know, that made Ella's world, because like that was her biggest fear, and it's like, you accept me, you love me for that, and it's like, yeah, that's so awesome. All the while you have the whole situation with Lucifer and Dan. It's like, oh, Dan got swindled by the witness Beckett, then Lucifer's helping out, and then he got swindled too. But I love that we did get merchandise out of it. It was the picture of Dan on a roller coaster, which I feel bad for Dan, because I'm not a big fan of roller coasters either. His circumstances are a lot more personal. It's because, like, oh, he tried to go on a date with a girl, and then she kind of ended up in the splash zone with the whole situation. So, and I love they ended up having to bring in Maze. Once again, it's kind of interesting, because, like, out of context of the timeline, you're like, well, where does this stand? Because, like, it depends on then, because it's like, oh, Maze, I guess she's on good terms with Lucifer and everyone then, because she's helping out and everything. Because Lucifer even got his car stolen by her. She took his keys, took Dan's badge. I mean, I guess it seems like she's kind of just, an asshole. Let's just leave it at that. Just from other people that kind of come in the episode, it's like, yeah, Beckett's kind of an asshole. So, like, this whole, like, she took advantage of this crime happening just so she can have an excuse to get out of school. The reason why she was crying in the first place is because at the crime scene, there was perfume, and that, like, it just fed into it and made it easier for her. It's just kind of like, oh, it's like she's so sad, and Dan's trying to be supportive and help her, and it just, she kind of spit in his face, and she kind of made him kind of do this whole runaround situation. So, I love the back and forth because it's like, because Dan at first was like, okay, are you going to help? And he's like, of course, Daniel. Are you going to make fun of me all day? Of course, Daniel. And Lucifer does until the shoe gets on the other foot, which Dan kind of enjoys it for a moment, but then it's like, crap, we lost her again. Then they have Maze laughing at them. And I love that, like, Dan was like, yeah, I didn't tell Chloe. And then Lucifer's like, yeah, there's probably, yeah, you know, I think that it's perfectly fine that we didn't tell Chloe. I mean, it's so interesting that whole, like, subplot just ended up not being a thing on many different levels. I mean, it was still pretty neat. That was all happening. Like, I love little moments where Lucifer and Dan bond. It's not always, like, the most well-oiled machine when they're bonding, you know. It doesn't always happen, but I do love it when it does happen. So that was kind of a neat aspect to this episode that I really liked. But the real kick in the teeth for me is when it was all said and done. It's like, you know, it's like, hey, I'm a leave now because obviously, but Ella's like, hey, you know, someone wants to have my back every once in a while. Like, just make sure you don't watch me when I'm taking a shower. That's creepy. It's like, I wonder, is that true or not? Was she really, or was she just playing? She had like, it was just meant to be a joke, but it's like, I don't know if that's true or not. I also love, like, why are you hiding in the closet with me? You're a ghost. No one else can see you. But to me, my favorite thing was when she was like, yeah, she said that line. And he was like, wait, where? I've never heard you say that before. She's like, yeah, my friend Ray Ray said it. And he's like, wait, what? I was like, it's someone Lucifer knows. I was like, oh, no. It's like, it makes so much sense at that point in time. It's like, oh, you're my guardian angel. And that's why I thought, like, Ella would have said something. But the moment she was like, you're my guardian angel, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, you don't think that's one of his siblings? I was like, sister. I was like, a sister. I was like, the only girl we know about amongst his siblings is, and they said, Ashley. I was like, what? For one, it's awesome because it's just Charlene Gee's an episode, but also on top of that, she's freaking Ashley. I've been asking about this since like season 2. I even talked about her potentially popping up in season 3, which I guess to a certain degree she kind of did, because it's like her blade has been floating around. It would have been so good if she was like, yo, like, what about my blade, bro? Maybe she doesn't care. I mean, maybe that's never been her thing. She is the angel of death and everything, so because Lucifer's like, yeah, you just kind of abandoned me once Dad kicked me out. She's like, what do you want me to do, dude? Like, there's so many people that die. I even loved it, but she was kind of like, and this kind of feeds into why I was talking about Ella being who Ella is. It's because the fact of the matter is, the reason why she stuck around is because she found Ella so interesting. Like, they met during that accident, but, you know, Ella survived, but she stuck around because she liked Ella, because it's like, oh my God, dead people are so remote. And it's just kind of like, but it's like, Ella, you know how Ella is. She's so peppy and she just talks and stuff. And it's just like, you know, I just stuck around. It's like, they bonded and became friends. And it's like, that's so awesome and so cool. So that's what this was all about. In fact, she's actually the one that suggested for Ella to move to LA because she knew that's where Lucifer was. I was like, what? That's crazy, which pisses Lucifer off for a moment because, like, okay, first she abandoned me during this whole rebellion situation when I got kicked out. I haven't heard jack squat from you in like a century or more. And then it's like, now I find out you're manipulating me too, just like Dad is with the detective. But it's like, no, which she kind of half yes and half no. She did it for Ella's sake and for Lucifer, because she's like, I couldn't be there all the time for both my favorite people, that being Ella. And it's like, because I thought that was so adorable, because it's like, yeah, you're my favorite big brother. Like, amongst their siblings, she'd be the only one that would like hang out with them. And it's like, plus they prank Amenadiel, and stuff like that. But it's like, you sit there and listen to me kind of drone on about nothing. So I wanted to bring my favorite 2 people together. That was her main reason, you know? And I was like, that's so sweet. And she just kind of ups and leaves. But she watches at the end when Lucifer goes to Ella and just listens to her. Because I'm sure, like, for him, it just made him, you know, it's kind of the same reason why he kind of sticks around Chloe. No matter what the circumstances are, he just enjoys being around her. So he enjoys Ella too, because like from the very beginning, he's like, no, stay. He's like, oh, you're staying, thank goodness. But at the very beginning, he was putting his foot down. It's like, no, you stay, because it's like, she's part of this little family and everything. So he enjoys having her around. Like, we, you know, because of the finale and everything, we know Ella comes through in the end. We know, she, like I said, this little OG family she's a part of and everything. But I thought it was kind of super sweet him sitting there listening, because I'm sure like Ella could kind of fills that role as a little sister. It's like he has that with Azriel, so I guess like Ella kind of fills that role. So like listening to her just talk about the stuff she's passionate about probably reminds him of those good old days just kicking with Azriel, and we see her kind of smiling and then walking away. And I was like, dude, that's so good. You gave me what I wanted. Obviously not under the circumstances I wanted it, but I was like, that's so good. I've literally been asking about this. Like I said, I figured she'd have to pop up at some point in time, considering the fact is her Blade played such a part in season 2 storyline, but nevertheless, I was like, that was so good. Like that, like I said, that was just a beautiful episode. Like I love that we got the background we did on Ella, and I was like, that's so good. So there's that episode, and then there's a second episode. The entire premise I talked about is basically if Lucifer never met Chloe. In my head, for whatever reason, I was thinking more so like Lucifer remembers something happens, and then it's like, oh yeah, his like he's the only one that remembers, and he tries to fit the timeline back together. Like, no, I know all this stuff. I'm trying to work with Chloe, even though we've never met. But it's like, no, like everything in everyone's lives has changed because certain things are changed. The big thing that changed everything was the fact is it's Chloe's dad dying is what inspired her to become a cop. In this timeline, he's alive. So she just kind of went to the other side of her family, that being her mom, and just because her mom kind of pushed her more towards that acting thing. But, so we see that. Which is kind of interesting and weird seeing her play that role. The moment she got shot all those times at the beginning, I was like, oh, whoa, what the? I was like, oh, are we doing kind of like a media res type of situation where we kind of start at the end and then like work our way backwards? And then we kind of do like 40, it's like all that blood and stuff. I was like, this is part of a movie. She's an actress, and it turns out to be the case. So many different interesting aspects to this. One thing I will note that I thought was so fascinating about this episode is the fact is Lucifer, like he brings it up one time, he makes a reference like, oh, being devilish. He never tells Chloe that he's the devil at any point in time, which is so fascinating because he does it all the time. Like he always refers to himself as the devil. And I think that kind of shows, some interesting aspects to it. Cause even later on in the episode, I know I'm skipping around a lot, but when he got shot, like, it's like, oh, what happened? It's like, he got covered up his wounds. Like, he never went out of his way to hide stuff like that before. But I guess it's because because legitimately he always told Chloe the truth because of their bond, because of how important she was. Even from the very beginning, he made it apparently clear. He's like, I didn't want to lie. He doesn't tell lies. So he told her straight up from the very beginning who he was. So it's just kind of interesting to see under these circumstances, he's not really like, kind of like saying it over and over again. Like, and that's just such an interesting aspect to it that I just couldn't help but notice throughout the episode. I think the only line where he's like, oh yeah, a devil like me or something like that, you know, that's the only time he references it and never any other time in the episode. So I thought that's kind of interesting. Basically, the whole case was about a guy that she knew named Strider. He was a stuntman. He ends up getting killed at Lux, which this is important to, Lucifer, because now it's causing a whole problem where he can't sell his business because he's trying to expand out into Las Vegas because of his lawyer Charlotte setting that up. I was like, what? It's so interesting because of certain aspects, because Charlotte never had her epiphany about, you know, dying and going to hell. She kind of kept up her criminal aspect, like kind of being the bad attorney that she was, lawyer, kind of representing bad people, which I guess that speaks volumes about Lucifer. But the fact of the matter is that she kind of stayed in that life because of that, because she never got possessed by the goddess and ended up here. So it's just kind of fascinating. What's also weird because even the voiceover, which I'll kind of get to in a second, is he's making out, like Lucifer is making out with her, and the voiceover is like, yeah, the woman that was kind of once possessed by your mom, which is like, yeah, that's what makes this situation weird. They even reference it this season when they were just kind of like, when she started making out with Lucifer, and he's like, what are you doing? Because it made him feel weird and gross, because it's like, you were once my mom, and I know you're not my mom now, but that's still kind of weird. That's a line I'm not willing to cross. But on some level, even he was kind of like, yeah, this doesn't feel right. Maybe on some subconscious level, I don't know. It just, obviously, storyline reasons, maybe he just wasn't feeling it. But at the same time, it's just kind of like, it's just funny from an outside perspective, being like, yeah, there's a reason why you're not feeling it. But the thing I find very fascinating is, like, obviously, this is all being told from God's perspective. He's the one to kind of set this all in motion. Obviously, who voices God in this episode, Neil Gaiman, if you don't know, is the dude who made Lucifer slash Sandman that the comics that these characters, well, Lucifer in particular, is based around. So I think that's so fascinating because like it's like on a meta level, you are kind of Lucifer's dad because you created him. So it's kind of like it's kind of fascinating to me. But basically, this is all like a what if because it's like, oh, I've been told, you know, like, oh, I set things in motion between him and Chloe. It's like, well, yeah, well, let's see what happens if they never did me, if I didn't kind of interfere and just let things kind of play out in their own way, which they inadvertently ended up finding each other because they wanted to investigate this for different reasons. Obviously, for Chloe, it's like, oh, yeah, like he was my friend. I want to investigate this, especially because we end up finding out that Dan's a dirty cop, which like kind of makes sense because him and Chloe never got together. They had Trixie. Trixie and Chloe brought the balance to his life. Yeah, he did some stuff and like that, some corruptible stuff, sure, but he never went full on bad guy. Like they kept him off from going over the edge. And even when he kind of did go over the edge, like redeeming himself in Chloe and Trixie's eyes, like set him forward, like going forward through like season 2 on, he wanted to be a better person. And he became one. He became a good cop, you know, a good guy because of it all. So it's so interesting seeing him just kind of being full on like bad guy, even to the point even Lucifer's like, yeah, I know, like, oh, your corrupt system, so even he knows. And they have crossed paths at some point in time. I am curious to know, like, where in the grand scheme of things this, like, obviously, once again, it's a standalone episode, so it doesn't have to take place in a particular time period, but I'd assume this is taking place, like, the beginning of the series, potentially, like, that moment Chloe and him met at the beginning of the series. Maybe this takes place in a later point in timeline. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. It's just kind of interesting to think about. Also finding out about Linda too. Basically, she's still a therapist, but she actually owns her own. She's on the TV. She's on her own TV show. She's what is it? Dr. Linda. It's essentially like a Dr. Phil situation. In fact, her set is exactly her office, which I think is so fascinating. Actually, her and Chloe actually know each other because her being an actor and everything. So it's like getting a therapist and stuff like that. So that's how they know each other. Obviously, I'll kind of break everything down in a little bit more, but it's also interesting because Aminadil is like shows up during the episode because Lucifer prays to him to kind of get his help and everything, and it's like, why are you even here, brother? Like, you know, shouldn't you be home? Because the fact is, this is because you got here so quickly. It's almost like you're doing nothing. It's like, oh, you haven't been home in years. Oh, wow, because you've literally been homeless flying around. And then I'm like, oh, that's actually fascinating because of Lucifer's bind to Chloe and stuff like that, that motivated Aminadil to push even harder to get Lucifer to go home. Like, without this whole situation, he's just kind of waiting for Lucifer to have his fun, get bored, then he can drag him back to hell. But under these, like, it was Chloe and all of that mingling with humans, even to more of an extent, I guess, is what really kind of pushed him to kind of eventually do kind of the terrible stuff that he did. That's kind of how I'm treating it, so... But in the grand scheme of things, kind of reworking a lot of stuff. Obviously, Chloe and Lucifer ultimately decide to work together in this case, even though it's not really neither one of them was really all for it at first. But it's like, okay, we need to get this done. Lucifer ends up sleeping with that Erica girl, which isn't what Chloe wanted him to do. It's like, I meant to do the whole, like, you know, desires thing that you did before. And that dude's like, oh, he's like, you should have been more clear about it. He's covered in, like, lipstick kisses all over him. Interestingly enough, because it's just like, I love it because her dad happens to walk up and say, yeah, I've been hearing you running around with that nightclub dude. What was his name? And then, like, hard cut to her just, like, yelling, like, oh, Lucifer screaming in his name, and just, like, Chloe just been like, ah. Because basically this is her kind of trying to prove to her dad that she can do this. Also because, like I said, the case is personal to her. So they do end up figuring out the one behind this was that dude Roger. Basically, Strider was supposed to be part of some theft. It turns out to be about the car. Which, interestingly enough, isn't that the same car that Lucifer kind of has? I don't remember what he was driving around in. Was he driving around in Chloe's car this episode? I don't remember. Maybe he doesn't have that car. Because, like, in retrospect, it's like, oh, yeah, that car. Because it even seemed like Lucifer was like, yes, it is a very nice car. And it's like, is that in because I'm trying to think, isn't that the exact same car? It's just in different colors and not just black like it is? I think so. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that. Maybe that's what that was kind of supposed to be a wink and a nod to. But nevertheless, it turns out he did all this because Strider backed out. But that's because Strider wanted, you know, he was getting into race car stuff. Like, this is going to be his big break, kind of getting away from all of this. And it's kind of like, because it turns out his dad was actually one too, so it was kind of following in his dad's footsteps and stuff like that. So, Well, it's interesting. I'm curious. Was he just not in close enough proximity to Chloe? Is when Lucifer got shot? Like I was halfway expecting him to get shot once, and then it's like, oh man, like I thought it was gonna have like a dire ending. But I mean, even if it's a standalone episode, I thought it was like, oh man, kind of like him and Chloe's first instance of like her shooting him in the leg, and like, oh, that's when he found out about him being immortal. It seems like that never came up in this episode. Like I said, I don't know whether it's an aspect that ever came up. Like Chloe is a miracle baby, sure, but maybe that little spark inside of her. I'm curious, was that always supposed to be something that happened, or did God just kind of like, oh, I didn't expect that to be a side effect. Interesting side effect, you know. That's something I've never really thought about before. I mean, maybe what makes her special and do that to Lucifer? Yeah, maybe it is kind of meant to be just kind of a learning experience. I'll get to it in a second, but after everything was said and done, Chloe's dad, even though he was kind of disapproving most of the episode, he goes, it's not because he didn't believe she couldn't do it, which Lucifer is like, yeah, he knows about disapproving fathers and stuff like that. But in Chloe's dad's case, it's because he lives this life. He didn't want that for, obviously it's this little girl. Obviously he didn't want her to go down this path because it's like any interest she might have, he tries to push it away because he knows that she could potentially, decide to want to be a cop. And that is something she ultimately kind of decides at the end of the episode, which I thought was kind of fascinating. And she's like, oh, maybe your dad will surprise you. And then Lucifer's like, no, kind of no chance of that happening. Because, in Lucifer's head, he thinks he's got his dad all figured out. And it's just, like I said, and it's something that she tackles in this episode. And it's just kind of like a dad wants to help. A father would do anything for their child, you can't really expect anything less from them. Like anything they do for their child's sake, because that's just what a father would do. And that's kind of why he did what he did, setting Chloe and Lucifer's path. Because in his mind, it's kind of like people don't always, you can't just like nudge people always in the right direction. You kind of have to let them stumble a bit and find their own way. That was kind of the whole point. Like he's like, yeah, he put Chloe in his path, but everything that happened, them falling in love, this episode was supposed to show like no matter what, they were always going to find their way to each other. That in some shape or form, those passions and who they are underneath will lead there. I almost completely forgot. It's so interesting because Ella is actually, I guess like her brother kind of roped her up into this whole life. Because she works at the chop shop, like her brother from season 2 we got introduced to. Like I said, I don't know if that's the same brother that she was referencing last episode about the whole Detroit situation or not. I wonder is it just kind of things worked out differently, so she ended up getting pulled into that life. It is interesting that Lucifer did go to her for help with the case and stuff like that. Even though she kind of works in the criminal world, she's still kind of very helpful, and that's kind of the whole point. Like even under these circumstances, a lot of people still ended up being who they kind of were. It kind of worked out. I mean, Dan and Charlotte was trying to steal money from Lucifer, which is interesting because I was like, oh man, that's going to turn out bad for whatever reason I thought it was. Turned out not to be the case at all. They kind of found their own happiness in it because Maze actually let her leave with the money, which is kind of interesting. It's like actually in this way, their stories actually worked out better because it's like at least they're together in the storyline and they're happy. So obviously this is, obviously referencing the fact is that this is taking place after potentially a lot of season. Like you can make the argument that this takes place like definitely after like the season 3 finale, especially with a lot of stuff that was kind of revealed. I mean, obviously like the whole like Charlotte situation. So in some way it's like, yeah, things are kind of happier, even though it's kind of like, they start off kind of bad people, but in the end they found each other and I don't know, made it work. So that's kind of neat. But there was also the Maze situation where Maze was like, oh, I want to know why you're using the money. I'm like, why are you so interested in it? I was like, why you're so fine with her taking the money? I was like, oh, right. It's like, because you'll, it's like stack up all your sins and I will get you an L, which is so interesting considering the fact is, like I said, it makes this whole thing interesting because like Charlotte's experiences helped her turn around and become a very good person who tries to do the right thing, did the right thing when the time came down to it. So it's just kind of interesting. And you have Maze, which even God was talking about it. Like, yeah, even people who kind of took things down a darker path still had the potential because we see her kind of burning half people's faces. Which is interesting. I guess that's just I know it's her mark because it's, because I guess that's how she looks all the time. I thought that was just kind of aesthetically what she did. But I mean, I guess I never thought about it. I mean, it's not something that comes up a lot, revealing her demon face. Like the only time she's ever revealed it was the Trixie. Like half her face is kind of skeletonly and the other is still kind of like her like humanish looking face. But I always thought like she just did that just for that. I never realized that that's just how she looks all the time. But this kind of made it clear because she's like burning people. It's like, oh, you're part of my little cult. whatever the hell she's going down. I guess it's like her way of compensating with the whole. I mean, I don't know. But still saying that even though things are different, that potential is still there in her case as well. And even in Linda, because Linda was kind of caught between that situation of because she's this doctor on TV. It's like, oh, it's like she tries to be a good therapist. Her conscience is getting to her because it's like, hey, I should be, be sympathetic to this guy's situation. But also it's like, oh, ratings. So you should tell to do something that will break his heart and get him to break down in front of TV, So that whole struggle, which is so interesting because that seems like it's never been an issue for Linda, and it's so interesting to see her under those circumstances. Then the Menadil, because there's a whole like thing of Lucifer being like, yeah, humans are a bit absurd, but you should try, talking to him, which he tries to, but he doesn't. He takes a step back. Maybe it takes meeting the right human to set things on that path. Like even though he met Linda under false pretenses, that kind of led to their bond and ended up eventually getting them to where they are now. Like obviously them caring for each other to the point that they did, but also because it's just like she was the first human that he really got attached to. I mean, obviously got it much like Lucifer. This whole situation has led to him kind of this. Obviously, they're Lucifer's family by extension, so obviously that makes his family by extension. So. Very nice premise to an episode. Like I said, overall, like both of these episodes are so like freaking fantastic, which just makes me want the show to come back more. I was hoping on some level as like, okay, maybe they're test running this, see how many people watch it. Like whatever you do, I know it's less and less likely the more time goes by that they'll change their decision. Fox, renew it, or at the very least, I want someone else to pick it up. Hulu, freaking Netflix, somebody get the show, because this is on Hulu anyway. Like Hulu airs this. So I don't know if Hulu buys up a lot of shows. I think there's some shows that they bought, haven't they? Didn't they buy the Mindy Show? So like I want them to do that. I want to see more of this show. This is so good, especially with the freaking Azure thing, dude. It's like that's so cool. It probably will never come up to anything again, even though it's very standalone-ish. Like I'd love to see more. See, like obviously, like I said, at the very very freaking least, one more season, because we got like Chloe now knows the truth and what that means going forward. I want more than just one more season, but I can live with just one more season, just wrapping everything up, and that's all I want. Especially where everything is in these episodes. I was just kind of like, I knew I'd be a little throughout the episodes, but severely enjoyed these episodes. They were ridiculously good. Like I said, that whole Neil Gaiman playing God situation, it was a nice touch. I wasn't expecting. I was like, oh, who's this voice actor? We've never given God a voice. I mean, there's a whole like Timothy God and It's Going to Bother Me. Lassiter from Psych. That actor, him playing God, but that being what it was, wasn't it? Yeah, last season. So there's that. But like I said, it was just kind of a nice fit, just being who he is and everything. So, like I said, I'm still crossing my fingers, hoping that this won't be the last we see of Lucifer. There will be more, hopefully, in the future. So I'm still going to keep my hold out for that. But for now, this seems to be the last thing we will potentially be getting. So I'm a little happy because, like I said, everything that they were, but at the same time, it's sad because it's like there won't be any more. So it leaves me very, very, very conflicted. So. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.